What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host Grant Hughes. We are on to the Eastern Conference mailbag that we promised you. Before we get started, my usual reminder / please. The best way to support this podcast is to, one, subscribe to it across every platform, your podcast player and YouTube if you haven't already. Like, comment on YouTube, tell the algorithm love us back, and to recommend us to people if you've done all those things. Shout us out on Twitter, retweet our promos. If you do recommend us to someone and they take you up on us, let us know. We like hearing that. Compliments are always good to hear. Join our Discord. That is the other way that you can best help continue to grow the community. The link to that is in the podcast and YouTube descriptions as well. And follow our social handles at HardwoodKnocks on TikTok and Twitter and YouTube, at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. We do post native content just to those social channels. So quick clips as well from these longer podcasts. With the housekeeping notes out of the way in under a minute, we asked the question everyone's actually dying to know the answer to. Grant, how the heck are you doing?
Like Yuta Watanabe reacting to a Kyrie Irving tip dunk. I am delighted to be here. Have you seen that? Did you see his reaction to it?
Yeah, that was incredible.
It's like, you don't always get like genuine, unfettered emotion in life. And so when you see it, like, and Watanabe is kind of like a darling right now. Everybody, like, his approval rating is like 150%. And to see him just like hands on head, just like giddy after Kyrie's tip dunk against, I can't even remember who it was against the other day. That's great. That's like my favorite thing, is just seeing somebody over the moon about like a silly play.
Look, the vibes coming out of the Nets right now are just uncomfortably sanguine. And it's making me, it's unsettling me.
It is unsettling. We'll talk about them. But we are going to get to some Eastern Conference mailbag questions. As you said, as promised, we will always deliver. And I have the Atlanta Hawks first. If we're ready to go, let's dive in, right?
Yeah, let's cannonball. I'm going to belly flop in, I think.
Belly flop. I'm going to jackknife. Jackknife's an underrated pool entry technique. So this is from Crabtree. What is the Hawks' 2 to 3 year ceiling? And so I guess like this is a ceiling I always think of as, you know, if everything breaks right, or almost everything breaks right, like how good is this team? To me, it's conference finalist, which is kind of like, it feels like I'm punting because they actually have been a conference finalist essentially with this core. It's not the highest bar, but like to get beyond that, to me, or even to get there, because I think now in hindsight, most people would agree that that run to the 21 conference finals was, you know, it seems hard to imagine. It's hard to believe that happened. The path wasn't that difficult, and just, you know, a lot broke right. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. But just to flash forward to now, this version of the Hawks is 1-5 over the last 2 weeks. They can't score still. They're 22nd in offense. Their defense has been better than their offense this year, which is like, I guess that's glass half full, but it's also just what's going on. There's just not enough shooting. So their full season numbers are roughly where they are, even though the record is really rough over the last, 2 weeks, last, 10 days or so. I just think if you look at the short term of this team, it's kind of locked in because basically everybody's under contract next year other than Bogdanovic has an $18 million player option, which I assume he'll opt out because he can do, at least as well over a multi-year deal. The Holiday brothers are going to be free agents. What's it going to cost to get off John Collins? Like, should it cost anything? We've talked about this a lot. Just, I'm trying to think of ways that the
wanting multiple picks for him. Did you see that report?
Just
like
no,
Utah wanted first round picks to take on John Collins.
That's never going to not be wild to me, even though he's shooting like 20% from three and it's rough. It's bad. It looks bad right now, but I just can't get over, his age 23 or 22 season, whichever it was, 2010, 40% from three. He played great defense in that 21 conference finals run. Like, he was a valuable playoff contributor. But so zooming back out, you could talk me into, if everything broke right, like Collins figures it out, Young starts making shots, DeAndre Hunter is not a massive disappointment. They bring back Bogdanovic. The next 2-3 years, you could talk me into them being better than almost anyone in the East other than Boston, just because Boston's locked in. It has a ton of talent. Like, maybe things go bad with the Bucks. Middleton doesn't re-sign. Holiday gets older. Something falls apart there. Brooklyn's combustible, obviously. Philly, maybe Embiid asks for a trade because we're dealing with a 3-year window. So there's a lot on the table. I can't get past Boston. They're just not going to be better than them, I don't think. So yeah, that's about as high as I can go. And the downside I would add before I, ask your thoughts are like the downside is this team is rebuilding within like the next 18 months. And like that includes Trae Young being traded, that includes Collins being gone, that includes trying to get picks back that you gave up for DeJounte Murray. So the downside is I don't know how steep that gets, but to me, it's more plausible we're talking about the Hawks starting over in a 3-year window than we're talking about them as like making the finals.
I would agree with you on the overarching sentiment here, which is that it's more likely they're starting over in the next 3 years than not. And even if that's a recalibration around Trae Young, like I'm not even saying it's new, trade Trae, but it could be because at that point in the next 3 years, you're talking about his third contract. Like we're nearing the end of his second. I don't know what the pathway to this team to getting better is. Like they should not have made the Kevin Huerter trade. That's pretty clear. They've nuked John Collins' trade value. And I honestly don't know when you look at them, what is their biggest need? It feels like they have biggest needs. And
Right.
that's like a major problem when you're not a team that seems like it wants to spend, has a bunch of assets, or even is particularly flexible moving forward. And so, like, I've tried to think of in an ideal world, I try to look at it this way. What would be the one player, non superstar, that you could target that would significantly drum up their current ceiling? And I've been unable to identify that player. I think, and I don't, this is a cliche, but I was like, if it was OG Anunoby, maybe.
Right.
Like, does he provide just enough shooting and shot creation to go along with the defense where you're alleviating the burden on even DeAndre Hunter, where DeJounte Murray has helped there? But I like, and that's even still dependent on, well, you would need Bogdanovich to stay in that situation. They feel like they are 2 or 3 players away from being a routine contender in the East. And there's also the thing that I can't escape here is yes, maybe Nate McMillan isn't the ideal coach here. The shot profile is outmoded. I think a lot of that has to do with their personnel, frankly, when you look at where Trae and DeJounte Murray like to operate. But also, okay, improve the coaching. Is there something here with Trae Young and like behind the scenes locker room issues? I don't want to overblow it. And like the Hawks have come out pretty forcefully and said, the Shams reporting is like, what did they call it? BS, basically, which is like, I trust Shams' reporting on it, whether there was actually substance there or things we didn't know already. That's a different story. But like, there's been enough smoke here for there to be fire for a while. And the fact that the report, I don't even think this was from Shams, came out that players in the locker room would have sided with McMillan over Trae in this scenario. If that's even like, there's an iota of truth to that, that's a real problem. And the other thing is just, which might set them back because we've seen they've had other changes aside from Travis Schlenk stepping down. We know that Landry Fields reportedly is more motivated than ever to trade Collins. Why did you let Schlenk go through the offseason? Like he was the one that makes the Murray trade, extends DeAndre Hunter, goes through your draft, goes through the free agency, but trades Kevin Huerter. Unless Landry Fields was the final say on that, like what? Like now he's gone in the middle of the season and you're sort of changing regimes. I just I don't understand the logic here. And so I don't mean to be all doom and gloom with the Hawks. They have a lot of talent. I'm with you in the sense though, and maybe you have better ideas on how to fix them or what they need. I'm with you in the sense though that over the next 3 years, their ceiling, it's conference finalist, which is that's fine, but
Mm-hmm.
it's more likely, not that they don't make it, that's always more likely. It's more likely that we're talking about a full-on teardown over the next 3 years than them being a conference finalist again.
Yeah, and I think so part of the problem is, you know, what the Hawks need is the version of DeAndre Hunter that they thought was worth 90 million. That's like one thing. And then I think, optimized and Capella hasn't been playing, but a Kongwu in the middle as just like a defensive, game wrecker. I think that solves a few things. Young not shooting 31% from three. I feel like I've mentioned that almost like every time we talk about the Hawks. Like, how much different does the season look if he's at 38%? But to me, you mentioned it. And you don't want to overblow stuff like this, but I just have and no good point has ever started with I just have this feeling, but I just have this feeling that the Trae Young stuff is real. And some of that is the reporting, and some of that is just the idea that I really don't. I could totally understand why he wouldn't be someone that guys like playing with. Some of it's the heliocentrism, but he's a great passer. So there's like, well, that offsets, the fact that he's always got the ball. But then there's also just like what makes Trae Young great outside of the range shooting, the great passing, the floaters, the craft, all that stuff. A lot of it's just the chip on the shoulder. Like he's a really like defiant, like super confident, like loves to kind of rile things up type of player. And that just might not be the kind of guy that is a great teammate. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't say that if there weren't reports about the team. If it's me or him, we're going with McMillan, and that just factors into it. So as almost as much as anything, I have some skepticism about the Hawks, mid and long term ceiling and future, just because it would the farthest thing from being shocked if it turns out that Young is just a tough guy to be around and play with, and everybody else on that team, Collins, it's been debunked and then bunked and rebunked over and over that Collins and Young haven't seen eye to eye. So it just feels like that's a factor that can't be ignored when you're talking about, well, which direction is the arrow going for this team?
AJ Griffin was a nice find. That's
Yeah.
a plus. Very quickly, can I play within the next year? I want to play a round of keep or trade with you for Atlanta. I'm just going to go through some of their players, and I don't even want an explanation. I just want to know keep or trade on these guys. Trae Young. Let's say before the 2024 trade deadline is what we'll use. Trae Young.
Trade.
Well, DeJounte Murray.
Keep.
Bogdan Bogdanovic, going to be a free agent this year.
Yeah, I'd keep him.
DeAndre Hunter.
Trade.
John Collins.
Keep, damn it. No, they're going to trade him. I would keep him.
Clint Capella.
Trade.
Onyeka Okongwu.
Keep.
And AJ Griffin.
Oh, keep.
All right,
so we traded half the rotation, basically.
You're starting over.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
You did say keep DeJounte Murray, though.
Yeah, I think I don't like a scenario where he's your best player. I just think I still think the logic of pairing him with Young works on paper. And I think if he's a guy that is a secondary, even he works fine as a primary creator if there's just enough shooting around him. I mean, he was an all-star in San Antonio with middling shooting. I don't think it's that hard. He's almost easier to integrate than someone like Young, but just that's as much personality as anything. I don't know. And that's assuming you don't have to max Murray out. It all depends on what you're gonna have to pay him on his next deal.
That gets into I don't want to spend more time on the Hawks, but that gets into an overarching discussion. Like when he reaches free agency, I think that free agency is going to look maybe not vastly different, but I think it's going to be a little bit more competitive, where we've seen a lot of players just sign contracts with their team and move later. I think there might be more player movement on the horizon, so you might need to max him to keep him.
That's a scary thought. I don't feel great about that.
Let's move on to the Boston Celtics, who are my team. Shout out Grant, by the way, for labeling these so that we didn't get... Last time, I figured it out before we went live, but I did research on like 4 or 5 teams because I fucked up the order. There was no, at least not that I know of, maybe we'll find out now. There was no mess ups this time, thanks to him. The 2-guest bastard. How good is the Celtics offense, and is it as dependent on three-point shooting as it seems, with the first 20 games due to unsustainably high three-point percentages, or are the last 10 or so due to unsustainably low ones? And so some background on this. So the Celtics start the season 21-5. This is how I broke it down for them. They were first in offense, 121.7 offensive rating. Their effective field goal percentage of 59.6 was first. By a country mile, basically. Denver was second at 58. Over their last 12 games, they're 26th in offense at a 112 offensive rating. Their effective field goal percentage has dropped by more than 7 points to 51.6. That is 27th. So they're in the bottom 5 of both offensive rating and effective field goal percentage. They're shooting from 3 during the 21-5 stretch, 40.8% across the board, both in the corners and above the break. That led the league by a comfortable, not really. Denver shot the 3 ball well during that stretch, but 40.8%. That ranked first in the league. Over their last 12 games, they are 30th at 30.5% on threes, including under 30% from above the break. To break this down one final time, during their 21-5 stretch, they shot 43.6% on wide open threes. During this stretch, they were shooting 31.3% on wide open threes. This is with wide open threes accounting for basically the same share of their total shot attempts. And so that hasn't changed at all. That leads me to believe that we're just simply experiencing peaks and valleys right now, and there will be a middle ground. And when you look at this stretch, their highest volume three-point shooters are, and this is in order of their attempts per game, Jaylen Brown, 31.8%, Jason Tatum, 30.9%, Marcus Smart, 30.5%, Al Horford, 39.6%. Dude's a god. Malcolm Brogdon, 28.9%. Derek White, 22.2%. Sam Hauser, 20 8.9%. And so you're looking at their top 7 in terms of volume 3-point shooters all being demonstratively below the league average. Not just what they were shooting before their league average. When you look at those names, Tatum, Brown, Brogdon, Sam Hauser for sure, there's going to be some progression to a mean now. Do I think that Boston's offense was too reliant on threes? I don't, because their 3-point attempt rate was never astronomically high. It's always hovered around like 10, 12 for the season. And even now, as they're bricklaying, it is currently at their third. So like, yes, it's up there in 3-point attempt rate. Could you pull back from that? It seems like they've got away from driving and dribble penetration a little bit. They were doing Jason Tatum specifically a good job of getting more to the foul line. Yes, you can get back to some of that. I don't think, did they have one of the 5 best offenses in NBA history? I thought on paper that was probably always fluky. And a lot of it did have to do with the 3-point shooting. I'm not worried about their offense long term. I think there's enough varying layers here to where they'll figure it out. And also, they've had to reintegrate Robert Williams III during this stretch, and that changes the geometry of your floor. And that's something that they're going to have to get used to. What do I like? We've seen the extremes: bottom 5 offense versus the best offense in the league. I probably think they should still settle into, not even just for the year, because we know the first 26 games will skew that, but they should be a top 10 to 12 offense. Like that 12 feels like almost their floor just because of the level of individual shot makers and creators that they have. And so, no, I'm not worried if their path to winning the title was, they're one of the 5 best defense and 5 best offenses. I think it's fair to question whether they fall under that umbrella, but I don't view anything here as sinister that they need to make some type of move at the trade deadline. They have a nice little tidy trade exception. It'd be good if they could do something with it or are willing to pay the luxury tax, penalties for using it. That being said, this is still, they are probably, honestly, look, they're probably the safest bet to come out of the East. When you look at what's happening in Milwaukee, we'll get to them. Brooklyn, we'll get to them too. But I mean, why are you going to trust Brooklyn? Philly's tearing it up right now. Like, what is Miami going through? They've gotten a little bit better. So I would say Boston's probably the safest bet in the East. And I didn't pick them to come out of the East. I picked the Bucks, and I'll stick to it. But this hasn't moved me in the direction of panic. I don't know about you.
No, I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think if the short answer to the question of how good is the Celtics offense is it's good enough. Like, it doesn't have to be great. Like, it's good enough now. And I think specifically with a team like this, there aren't a lot of teams that I give this kind of leeway to, but they were in the finals, they've made deep playoff runs. They look totally likely to do that again. I kind of am more interested in the highs and like the stretches where they're playing really great than I am concerned by the lows, which, there's just been a ton of variance. We're trafficking in small samples, if we're cutting the season up into 10 and 15 game increments even. Right. It's like, I just value now the shooting to start the season was totally unsustainable. It was just, everybody was shooting 40 whatever percent on good
44% on wide open threes is just like next level stuff.
Yeah. It's just, that was never going to last. But I think it's pretty compelling that they did sustain that for, what would have been a long chunk of a playoff run. And that's all it really takes. Like, if you have the capacity, if you have the shooters, and I think Boston does have enough like genuinely good shooters to say they could run that hot against playoff competition over a couple series or even more than that for sure. I guess it's as likely that they could run cold like they have for other stretches this season. Well, but I just like the highs. The highs matter more with a good contender like this.
I would say the only, really quickly, sorry to interrupt you because I rambled for 5 minutes, was who was the actual outlier throughout that entire stretch was Derek White. And I guess if you want to go Marcus Smart to start, but like we've seen Marcus Smart run hot for an entire season, basically from 3.
Yeah. No, it's just the overarching thing is when you're talking about a team that's as good as the Celtics, I think just when they show that they can hit a really high level, it just matters more than when they slump. Because I think even internally, it's kind of like, well, we're bulletproof. And then you let your guard down a little bit. And then that contributes some, along with variance and just randomness and regression to the mean. But that's a factor too for teams that are this good, I think. Speaking of teams that are this good, the Brooklyn Nets have won.
Segue.
So good. The Brooklyn Nets have won 1 trillion games in a row. They're the best offense in all the land. They're great at everything. And so this question is from not Grant Hughes at all. Come on, get at us, Brooklyn Nets fans, for a question here.
This is why I sent out 4 solicitations in total to our Discord. One from HardwoodKnocks' Twitter, one from NBA Matt's Twitter. Where are you at? Nets fans and Clippers fans kind of let us down this time.
Maybe they just don't care about anything until the playoffs. But
Clippers sure as hell don't. Sorry.
That's for sure. Yeah. So we talk all the time about how we started the season talking about how, like, well, it already was a tire fire, it seemed like, and the combustion potential was off the charts. This is the most high variance team in the league. Take that off the table for the Nets. Kyrie's going to say or do something crazy. They're going to try to get Jacques Vaughn fired for some reason. Like, take all the, like, maybe another trade. Like, take all that off the table. Take all the, like, oh shit, no way this is happening again to this team. So why shouldn't we believe the Nets can make the finals? If we just pretend, and this is purely a thought exercise, because I don't think it's safe to pretend that none of that stuff is going to creep in and kind of derail what's been one of the best runs of any team this season, even though the schedule and hasn't been all that tough, but whatever, like a winning streak like this is still a winning streak like this. So to me, there's only a couple areas you really look at, and almost all of them can be just overcome by incredible shot making, which this team just has, up and down the roster, particularly Durant, Irving, Curry, Harris, TJ Warren looks really good to me in limited stints. They're a little small. Nick Claxton has been awesome, but their only other real center that they play is Daron Sharp. And like, I get it. You want to use Ben Simmons there if you can. KD can play some center. They're a little small. Like, this is a problem for everybody, but like, what do you do with Embiid in a playoff series? That's really difficult for this team. Even Giannis, I think, probably poses a similar problem where there just aren't enough like bulky deterrents inside. Not the length is there because Durant's long and they can play a lot of forwards and wings that can have some reach, but that's an issue. It's tied to the defense. I think rebounding has been a problem for this team for most of the year. So through November, they were 21st in offensive rebound rate, 14th in defense, or no, they were dead last in both through November. Since December, during this run started, 21st and 14th in offensive and defensive rebound rate, respectively. That's improved a little. That's still probably not good enough.
I'm wondering if the Ben Simmons Claxton minutes now working. I wonder if that's helped there. I haven't looked at the rebounding percentages of those lineups, but I'm wondering if that maybe has helped them stabilize a little bit.
It does, and they're a little like the Celtics where, the offense can be good enough. Everything else can just be good enough, and then Durant is unstoppable, and Irving can get you 30 on 17 shots, and like that's just a recipe for winning. So size, defense, I guess you could question their shot profile. They're really reliant on just making mid-rangers. So they're first in effective field goal percentage this year, but they're 29th in location-based effective field goal percentage. But
that's the Kyrie KD effect.
Right. How big a concern is that if you just know that the guys that take the most shots are really good at shots that, theoretically you should not take? It's a little bit like we talk about the Suns, the last couple of years. Oh, they're mid-range. Well, it's like if Devin Booker and Chris Paul are taking all your mid-rangers, they're just going to make a disproportionate amount. So I guess the other big one is like how useful is Simmons going to be in a playoff series?
Yeah.
I mean, like he's still, I think I read the other day, he hasn't taken a free throw he hasn't made a free throw since November 25th.
That seems problematic.
Can he be on the floor at the end of games? I don't know. And he's so valuable to their defense that if you can't play him, then suddenly it's Claxton and like Royce O'Neal's playing, the only other guy you'd really trust, Durant maybe. So there's a few things, but I just come back to like, if you're telling me that this isn't going to blow up for non-basketball reasons, then we just have to view the Nets as dangerous as like literally anybody else.
I don't have any other concerns other than what does Ben Simmons look like in the playoffs, and then what's the Kyrie Irving wildcard factor. I honestly don't have anything to add to you. I will say that I think people might be underrating how valuable Nick Claxton is. Mm-hmm. It was probably already the single most switchable actual center in the league. Opponents are shooting this year. His rim protection has never been better. Both does that like zero like level stopgap, or someone who's coming over as helper, or someone who's breaking up plays from behind. They're shooting, and I was looking this up. I'm getting used to a second screen. That's why you see me staring off here, rather than shaking my first laptop here. 50.9% against Nick Claxton at the rim. There have been 38 players who've contested at least 150 shots at the rim. Only Draymond and Jaden McDaniels have better limiting percentages there. And his offense has been spectacular. I'm not even talking about like rolling, finishing at the basket. He's shooting like 80% at the rim, led the league in field goal percentage last time I checked, but he's hitting like 50% of his hook shots. He's putting the ball on the floor. I posted actually a clip of him because I was watching him. And so I posted some clips of like his more complicated usage. People on Twitter were commenting. They're like, some of these drives, they thought it was Kevin Durant. That's a huge swing piece. This is a player they almost traded for a protected first round pick. That's the only thing I have to add is that the only thing that's preventing the Nets from winning a title in my eyes is my own skepticism, which leads me to, this is from not Dan Favale at all. Can Kevin Durant win the MVP award? Is it, and I guess is it fair to hold what happened against him in the discussion? And why is the answer yes?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's the question, because I don't know how you get over. Well, the MVP is just such a cluster anyway, because like, what's value? What's valuable? Is it on court stuff? Is it offense only? Do we care about catch-all metric? Because Durant just excels in so many of those areas. But how do you get past? I'll say this: I don't think voters are gonna get past the fact that he really tried more than once to just blow the team up. And I guess it's a credit to how great he is that he just came back and is playing at an MVP level. Like, I don't think that's really debatable, but I just don't know how anyone's going to get past the other stuff.
Here's my thing. And I can't remember which podcast I was listening to. They were commending Durant's leadership, leading this team through the Kyrie Irving stuff, leading this team through his own trade demand, the Steve Nash firing. No, you absolutely can hold it. He might be the most valuable player in the NBA, but the Nets were in lurch. Does the roster look any different, or is it any better if he doesn't make his trade demand? You were the one that wanted the coach fired. And so, like, you didn't lead this team through anything that you didn't create. Like, and I'm not going to give you bonus points for navigating the Kyrie stuff because, first of all, you did it quite poorly, if we're being honest. And two, like, I don't want to hear another fucking thing about his love of basketball. That is awesome. Kevin Durant is an underdog when you look at his life trajectory. Everyone, like, if there are people in, like, not, this league isn't filled with Andrew Bynums who are only playing because, like, they make a lot of money and that was their best, occupational option. I don't even know how to phrase that. These players love the game. That's why they're here. That's why they're at the level. That's why most of them invest time in their craft. It's the money. It might be the famous celebrity. It's a combination of everything. Kevin Durant is not like some higher power. You think Kevin Durant loves the game less than Steph Curry? Like, you think Kevin Durant loves the game less than LeBron James? For the love of, and that's why LeBron's Lakers have fallen apart. He doesn't love the game enough. Maybe at this stage in his career, he doesn't. I don't want to fucking hear it. Like, if he's so love of the game that he wanted to be traded from Brooklyn, have his coach and general manager fired. No, and I think, and I'm part of this, and I want to, and I'll be remedying some in my next MVP ladder. I don't know if it's artificially, I have held him back in the MVP discussion because of this, where it's like, he should probably be 1, 2, or 3 at worst, based on the body of work from him, the minutes that he played, especially at the start of the year. I just think that if we're going to talk about teams, like, if wins and losses are a player stat, because the player has to come from this really good team, you know what? A player has to prove to me that he's not trying to submarine that team.
Well, it's like, if a pilot of a commercial airliner, like, sees a couple clouds and says, I don't like those clouds, I'm going to fly into the middle of this category 5 hurricane, and then somehow, like, makes it out. Like, everyone thinks we're all dead on this plane, and he makes it out. Do you applaud the pilot? Like, doesn't the first thing matter as much as the second thing? Like, it's just the self-created problem that you manage to navigate. Just, like, don't start the problem. Like, that matters.
It's also like, I don't remember the show that this came from now, but, like, I was watching a show way back when, and someone set a fire in their school chemistry room. They put it out, and then they got an award for putting out the fire. And I don't remember what show it was. And, like, that's what Kevin Durant did. He helped. If it wasn't him who set it on fire, he handed, like, the matches over to other people to do it for him. And then he put it out. And he's been terrific. He can be your MVP. But let's not pretend that, like, his love of the game transcended all here. Like, fuck that. Fuck that.
Let's keep coming up with analogies. If you jump into the lion cage at the zoo, and you drag 12 people with you, and then
Look,
yeah.
Kevin Durant understands his why more than anybody else in the league. That's why the Nets are here. Kevin Durant understands his why.
I don't
And look,
understand.
he was clearly right about Steve Nash, but that also kind of goes on him because does Steve Nash get hired without Kevin Durant say so?
Well, yeah, let's not be naive. He at least said, "Cool, let's do it," at absolute minimum.
And I don't mean to. Kevin Durant is one of the 10 greatest basketball players of all time. He's
Great.
probably been wire to wire the best player in the NBA this season. Is he the most valuable player in the NBA this season? Does putting out your own fires count as value? Who's to say? Are we ready to hop on to my team, which is the Charlotte Hornets? And we had more than one question on the Charlotte Hornets. I appreciate that, Hornets fans. Usher, which duo would you rather see with Wemby? Cade and Wemby or LaMelo and Wemby? I chose just the duo to make it more interesting because I think Detroit has more young talent than Charlotte. I would rather see, oh my God, I'd rather see LaMelo and Wemby. Let's just get this dude some fucking help. I think Cade and then having Jaden Ivey, Killian Hayes, and Wemby and that core in Detroit would be objectively better right out of the gate. But also, like, I want Wemby to get as much opportunity as possible on the ball. And if you have Jaden and Killian and Cade, but especially Cade and Jaden, how like does that limit his development? Also, Jalen Durant is there too. Is that, like him and Isaiah Stewart aren't guys that are going to clog up the pipeline for Wemby, but it is part of the equation. So give me LaMelo and Wemby, and then Wemby's just automatically your second option. And let's just let's see him cook on Charlotte and give some hope to the Hornets franchise in general, which I think is the most hopeless team in the league. We named them the most hopeless team in the league, but also just that's it. Kind of, I want to see players. I don't want to get into the talk of, well, what's LaMelo going to do next after he signs this extension? I want to just envision him being there because I like when organizations, unless they just so blatantly run them out of town, which the Hornets just might be doing at this point. I want to see LaMelo stay there. I want to see all these, like, I want to see smaller markets have their why, have their core. And Wemby and LaMelo would just be so much fun to me. I don't know where you landed on this.
No, it's LaMelo 100%. And it's like, yeah, the Hornets need Wembanyama the most, but they kind of deserve him the least. So
That's a good way to put it.
Some part of me is hesitant, but just like I think LaMelo is full stop one of the best passers in the league, and there's just not a lot of places to put the ball for him on this team. And just like, well, let's bring in the guy with the widest catch radius of all time. Like, imagine the lobs, imagine, and I think too, if there's anything to worry about with Wembanyama, it's that he'll be able to do so much as a rookie just based on, it's going to be hard to tell him not to take tough threes or just really go into his bag, because I mean, he's going to rightfully believe he can do that stuff, but I think it will help a lot if there's someone on his team that's just a high level thinker, distributor, passer, just because maybe the 4 or 5 easy buckets he would get from LaMelo. Not that Cade is is incapable of that kind of stuff, but LaMelo is just a dynamic facilitator of like cool shit. So I think having Wembanyama get easy stuff will be helpful and maybe prevent him from falling into the crowd pleasing trap or the like, I'm just going to do this myself. I think aesthetically, and I think for his development, probably playing with LaMelo is better.
Charlotte also, as much as their roster is just like meh, they can carve out better spacing, I would think, around. So let's say Mark Williams, LaMelo, and Wemby. You would have Terry Rozier just to get up shots and volume there. And then if Hayward is healthy for some reason next season. So where it's Detroit, it's like Jaden Ivey's such a question mark there, then playing him with Durant. And because Ivey's so ball dominant, where Terry Rozier is not. And I would also, although Wemby Durant is the more intriguing front court pairing, Mark Williams and Wemby could do some awesome shit together too. Next Hornets question comes from RMM. What are some realistic deals the Hornets can do at the trade deadline? And I'll preface this by saying, I don't think they need to do anything because they're going to be organically bad enough to just be in the Wembanyama sweepstakes, or Scoot Henderson, who had like this. I don't know if you saw the Scoot Henderson dunk on Tuesday night. Oh my God. Talk about that is like, I'll take that consolation prize.
Yeah.
So with Charlotte, and I'm not looking to get players that can help me per se this season. I'm looking to load assets up for the future. And I want draft pick flexibility because of the way that I protected the pick that I don't even remember who owns it at this point, because it's bounced around the league so many times. It's to Denver, but it's like it's lotto protected the next 3 years. So this year, 2024 and 2025. I'm looking at just what can I get for guys that I either shouldn't be investing in or won't be here long term. Jalen McDaniel is going to be a free agent. I think you can get a second for him. Like not a great second, but like a second. Terry Rozier in the first of a 4-year extension that's basically fully guaranteed. His partial guarantee on the final year is like 24.8 million of 27. It's just wild. I don't understand what. Like I just want to know what went into that at all. I don't think you're going to get net positive value for him, but if you just want flexibility to get his money off the books, maybe in a shorter amount of time, the Lakers to me are off the table with Westbrook. They're going nowhere, and Westbrook's been good off the bench. But like, what about a team that would teams be willing to send back expiring money or close to it for Terry Rozier? And so two that I thought of, Milwaukee, if you build stuff, if you're the Hornets and willing to facilitate a step ladder trade, Grayson Allen, George Hill's salary, you have like Jordan Nwora makes a little bit of money there as well. So you can get to bringing back or Joe Ingles, if you want to give him up, obviously, you can get to bringing back Terry Rozier. And I think he might help out. I know you don't necessarily want him to dribble a ton, but he might help out Milwaukee's half-court offense. The other one I thought about, and I don't know if they would do this, Orlando with Terry Rozier. Like maybe they don't want to go the consolidation route. Like you have some just Jonathan Isaac and Terrence Ross is expiring money for starters, and you can flesh out other types of deals there. So I would look at, can you get off Terry Rozier's money? Cap space doesn't mean the world in Charlotte, and I do think Rozier is valuable. We just talked about his spacing. This year's been, for most of it, a down shooting year for him, but a lot of that was look at the burden they placed upon him earlier in the season. I get why you would want to keep him, but you're also not at a stage where it's like, well, Terry Rozier at this number for the next 3 years just doesn't make a ton of sense. So I don't know if you have any, I'll throw it to you after I have 2 more players to talk about, but like Terry Rozier, any teams spring to mind for you, or would you just keep him if you're Charlotte?
I think the Clippers are another team you might look at just because John Wall has faded a little bit, and then you're just kind of looking at Reggie Jackson. I think what the Clippers might say is how much better is Terry Rozier than like a healthier, good version of Reggie Jackson. They're somewhat similar. But a team like that just Orlando's a great option just because to get a guard in there that could kind of run things and shoot it would be fine. It's a veteran team. It's a team that is looking to consolidate a little bit. The Clippers are the only, I think you covered it pretty well, but the Clippers are the one that jumped to mind first for me.
Clippers are interesting. So it's sort of like, would you prefer Terry Rozier over Marcus Morris and Luke Kennard, though? It could be Marcus Morris or Terry Rozier straight up, and the Clippers can get away with that.
Trade a distant pick to sweeten it. Morris, I think, is someone that, the Clippers just have such a log jam.
I do. If I'm Charlotte, I might do that straight up just because there's only one more year of Morris and you could play him at the 4, small ball 5. Maybe he's a better alternative than PJ Washington, who's my next player. Can you get a first for PJ Washington? I don't know which team would do that at this point. Maybe Miami. I thought about the Pelicans. They're not giving up a first round pick for him after the Zion injury. Phoenix, maybe. But what can you get for he's going to be in restricted free agency unless you think you're going to keep him for like $12 million a year or something. I would argue we never see these teams make these moves, but I would argue it's time to move on. And then finally, PJ Washington. Any PJ Washington teams? Would you trade him? What would you do with him?
If you told me I could keep him for 12 a year, I'd probably just hold on to him. I just don't know what the market is going to be in restricted free agency for him. Miami's good. It's really for him because he has his uses, right? Like, you lose a little bit when you play him at the 5 defensively, but he's like fine defensively as a 4 most of the time.
They don't play him at the 5 now.
He's proven he can shoot it. He's young enough to where you're probably going to get this level or better for the next, 3, 4, or 5 years. If I could keep him at a salary that's like low end starter / like 6th, 7th, 8th guy, which is probably 12 to 15. I'm fine with that. I just don't know the restricted free agencies. If you're trading for him, you just have to know it's got to be a wink, handshake thing. And that's hard to do when any other team can come in with an offer sheet.
I would probably move him though, if I'm them, because I think he ends up costing. Grant Williams is going to fetch a pretty penny. And I think Grant Williams is better than PJ Washington. Make that clear, but that's like sort of a market parallel for him that I think might drum up his number. Maybe we'll be wrong. His 3 ball has started to fall a little bit more recently though. So if he hits those, I think that'll have his markets. Kelly Oubre Jr. injury, unless you're using him to take back bad money at this point, He had surgery when he was kind of putting it off all season. I don't like, you could move him, but like if he's actually going to return this season, you're not getting a first round pick for him anymore if you ever were. Hayward to me seems immovable with the final year left on his deal after this season, and the fact that he's been so injured. But I did think, like, if you're the Hornets, this type of trade you should be thinking about, what would Dallas give you to consolidate long-term salary into Gordon Hayward? And that's Davis Bertans, Tim Hardaway Jr. At this point, maybe it's JaVale McGee is on that list as well. And if you're demanding a first round pick for that, they probably say hell no, because like they're not going to trade. But if you want like Josh Green or Jaden Hardy, is that something you consider if you're Dallas? Is that too much for you? Would you rather just play this out because you kind of divested Kristaps' contract into these into these more digestible numbers, but Davis Bertans is just such a non-entity for you. So that might be a team that I could see saying, oh, hey, like if Hayward was actually playing and the Heat had the money to get there, they would be interesting for him just because of that Duncan Robinson deal. But that's too low level on the deal spectrum. The Dallas has two. I know Tim Hardaway Jr. has been better, but his contract, Davis's contract, maybe even if you don't want Spencer Dinwiddie's contract, though I don't necessarily know why you would prefer Hayward over him at this point.
Yeah, I think I would consider it for Hardy if Hardy's the sweetener and going with the bad salary back. I
think
like
Mavs fans just like threw darts.
Well, I know. Part of it's I really like Josh Green a lot. But the idea of like a healthy-ish or as healthy as he ever gets Hayward on the Mavs makes a lot of sense to me. Just, the Mavs have changed a little bit how they played. It's still Luka, almost all the time. But another guy like Hayward really does move the ball well, and he's been a good shooter. It's just like, are we chasing a version of Hayward that's never going to exist again? Like that's a concern. And then, depending on how the Mavs want to time really hunting that real second guy, having Hayward's $31.5 million on the books next year,
is it more valuable to have, let's say, the smaller contracts with Davis, McGee, and Tim Hardaway Jr. to move with, let's say their pick conveys to the Knicks, their best offer, and I think it'll pale in comparison to others because they don't have Josh Green, Jaden, like those aren't blue chip prospects, but are those salaries plus 4 firsts and 3 swaps better than, let's say, Gordon Hayward's 1 salary, 4 firsts and 3? Like it's cleaner with Hayward, but teams might prefer the malleability of just having the smaller deals. It's just that Hayward's also comes off the books, whereas Davis Bertans and Tim Hardaway Jr.'s do not.
Yeah, I think normally you'd want more pieces in those mid-tier salary ranges because it's just easier to do stuff with those. But the fact that, talking about next year, 31.5 expiring, that's one you dump on some team with cap space if you need to and throw a pick in there, or you use it to aggregate and get like some crazy, giant star that wants out. Like so if we're getting way away from Charlotte, I guess. Because
we're trying to figure out how to get Hayward onto another team.
Dallas wants to package him with something to the Wizards to get Bradley Beal, and the Wizards say, we don't have to pay anybody after this year.
Good point.
That's appealing. But we're three trades down the pipeline at this point.
I'm happy that you have this next team.
Yeah,
because I didn't want them.
I got the Bulls. This is from Everything Blacks. The Bulls situation isn't completely unsalvageable, is it? This year might be lost, but the roster seems closer to needing a few tweaks rather than a full teardown. Disagree. So this is a win now roster, and you have to call it a win now roster, not just because of the age of like DeRozan and Vucevic, but because of the pick equity that was given up to sort of put this roster together. It's a win now roster that's not winning. They're okay lately. They're 4-3 in their last 7. They've had worse stretches. Unsalvageable is a strong term, but it applies here because if what you're attempting to salvage is like an Eastern Conference contender, that's just not here. It's not just tweaks. It's the principles are not good enough. And the role players are, secondary, they're ancillary to the real problems, which is you're paying a bunch of money to players that are supposed to be your best guys. And they're not good enough. They don't fit well enough together. There's reports that Levine and DeRozan have had friction, players only meeting stuff. That's all driven by your best players. Like no ninth man is the one that's saying, we got to sit down in the locker room and hash this out because I don't get along with the 12th man. That's not how it works. So you have structure.
I hope that happens. I really hope that happens all the time in the NBA because that's great.
So Yeah, I like what are the tweaks that you get, hypothetically, Lonzo Ball is magically back and he's the connector that's been missing and the second perimeter defender that's been missing. Maybe. I don't know if that's a tweak at this point. You need a defensive anchor. Vucevic ain't that guy. You need Pat Williams to be better. You need him to have a usage rate above like 14%. And you need him, he's shooting 40% from deep, but he just doesn't. It's such a like hack criticism, but like he just doesn't do enough.
No,
He
it's
just
if you watch him, there are long stretches on both ends of the floor where you just don't feel him.
right. So, and it's great if you shoot 40% on low volume and you can defend, but that's that's not fourth pick stuff, especially a couple years into the career, even if he's missed time. So I don't feel like tweaks are the issue. Just a couple things because this is usually more your territory, but so like if this isn't it, if this is unsalvageable, Levine's the guy that's got to go. It can't because he's going to bring you back the most. Um, you can't do it till January 15th. But like, where are the teams that are saying we got to have Zach LaVine at that number? Like, just gotta. We're backing up the truck for him. It's like Miami, just because they hunt stars. I don't think Lowry and a pick gets you like anywhere close. You got to throw in more stuff, and the Heat just are still a little short on assets. The Clippers, again, just because you can throw Norman Powell and filler and they can move some distant like 28, 29 firsts. Like that, I don't know. Orlando definitely needs a guard that can score, and they could throw Isaac and Suggs and Bamba and give back that 23 first. Let's have these two teams deal again. And maybe another, like, it's just how many, we'll get to this with the Knicks because I'm going to bring up LaVine again, but I just don't know where, the team is that says we're going to replenish your draft assets and give you, not terrible salary because we got to have Zach LaVine and we got to have him at the deadline. So that's ultimately the biggest challenge. And that's not a tweak. That's a fundamental, how do we fix this team question.
Yeah, and Zach LaVine's been a lot better lately too, but his
Mhm.
knees are super concerning. Like you said, he's younger than Bradley Beal, I think, by a year or two. But and he's cheaper, but the contract is still like 4 years out on that as a concern. I think Miami's a smart one. I kind of thought about Brooklyn, build stuff around Ben Simmons and all the picks that you have in your cachet now. And if you don't know that Kyrie's going to be there long term, is that something you look at? Toronto could use him. I don't know what they would be willing to give up for him, and does he fit into their project 6'9", whatever they're trying to do? But you would have to put, why do the Bulls want Fred VanVleet in that scenario? You're going to have to probably use OG Anunoby or Scotty Barnes, and I wouldn't trade Scotty Barnes for that. I might not even trade OG Anunoby for him at this point. And I think that's what's complicated to me is I think that Zach LaVine is still an exceptional player, and that the fact that he's been better gives the Bulls hope. And then if you look at the core of DeRozan, Caruso, Lonzo, and LaVine next season, like that's real. But how are you building upon that now? Vooch has been fine this season. I just don't know that he's the answer in the long term. Like you don't have your own all-in trade package to go anymore. Like the Patrick Williams mysterity is worn off. Ditto with Kobe White. I would assume would be super valuable to someone as for sure, but like you've hamstrung yourself with the amount of picks that you can give up. And so how do you, it's even if the Bulls are better than this, which with a healthy Lonzo and Zach LaVine playing the way he is now, and if they start beating teams that they should beat rather than just getting up against the good opponents, they should be better than this. But we talk about what's the Hawks ceiling over the next 3 years. I think the Bulls ceiling is lower than the Hawks, in part because they're probably even less malleable when you look at the trade market to buy than Atlanta would be.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Is that it on Chicago?
That's all I got.
So that brings us up to Cleveland. So we have, I should probably loop a few of these. Let's loop this first two together on Donovan Mitchell. Ippo Uji Flirk asked, when did you realize that Donovan Mitchell is the greatest Cavalier of all time? And Stupid Jerk asked, can we get a heat check on the Donovan Mitchell, on whether Donovan Mitchell can or can't be the best player on a championship contender take? So what's interesting about that is I don't know where either of us landed on whether we thought he could be the best player on a contender leading into the season. I do think we both thought Darius Garland was going to be the Cavs' best player this year, and that long-term it would be Evan Mobley. I started to recalibrate a little bit on how obviously Donovan Mitchell's been better than Darius Garland at this point, and he is the best player for what, I was listening to the Chase Down podcast in reaction to his 71-point game, And Justin Rowan, friend of the podcast, excellent at what he does, said that he didn't really classify the Cavs as like one of those foremost contenders. I might be there for them. And Donovan Mitchell's already their best player. If he can't be, maybe he can't be the best player on a universal contender, but the way that the Cavs are built, he can absolutely be the best player on this version of a title team. He's shooting lights out on off the dribble threes. It'd be nice if they played a little bit faster at points, not just in transition, but in the half court. But he's so good at playing off of others as well. And numerous people have said this, and I didn't watch in real time. I took the night off because it was my birthday and I'm vain as fuck. But going back and watching, like, there was nothing inorganic about the 71 points, basically. Like, he had, what do you have, 10 assists, 11 assists? And
11.
they very much needed, Garland wasn't playing, Mobley wasn't playing, so they needed him to have that role. But he is so much more adaptable than I think people gave him credit for, in large part because Utah, they had like these tertiary guys, but they were always either like too middle rung or towards the tail end of their primes. And Mike Conley, or like I said, a Joe Ingles or a Bojan Bogdanovic, like, they're ball handling specialists or secondary options more than they are another primary. So his adaptability is really shined through here. And yes, it helps that he gives a damn on defense again. So I don't know where I landed on the take leading in. I'll probably say that I didn't think he could be the best player on a contender, but I thought he made the Cavs a contender. I will update my take to say I believe the Cavs are a real threat to come out of the East now. And lo and behold, Donovan Mitchell is their best player.
Yeah, I think when we talked about him shortly after the trade, I know that I thought that this is a good trade, but the version of the Cavs that wins a title has Evan Mobley as their best player. And as I'm trending up on Mitchell as like, yeah, because of what you said, if your other like secondary players have been all-stars and could be all-stars again and are young and are going to develop, like, that maybe that gets you away from, we got to have a top 5, top 10 guy. If Donovan Mitchell's like the 12th best player in the league, that's maybe enough, provided that the Cavs do figure out the small forward spot and just get a big wing that can guard and make threes. Like that to me is still the missing piece, but like, I don't want to take anything away, because so much of what we look at in, well, can this guy be the guy on a title winner, is when things slow down and you need buckets late in games, like that's a signature skill. And if you're going to account for 99 points in a game with your 71 points and your 11 assists, like, I feel like that question's kind of answered. If you need a bucket, Mitchell, I think is as good an option, short of the absolute Kevin Durant's, Steph Curry's, Luka's, as about as good as you're going to get in that regard. So yeah, I think do we need to recalibrate is a fair question, but it all sort of, to me, hinges on the Cavs being still just like one guy away.
This next question on the Cavs came from Luke J. 37. I saw Zach Lowe say the Cavs are looking for a short-term wing option via trade. Who is most gettable and who would be the best fit for them? Most gettable is like Furkan Korkmaz. So like someone like, but so I said I'm going to do this later on with the Pacers, but will you play Who Says No with me? I came up with a few Cavs trades.
Okay.
Karis LeVert for Marcus Morris.
That's just a good trade. I don't think anybody says no to that, because that gives the Clippers another creator. I think that's valuable.
I don't know. Does it get weird with Reggie Jackson, John Wall, LeVert on the same team? Like, you could
maybe a little bit, but that's a weak area of weakness. I do think that Morris might be a little big and slow to guard the threes that he would theoretically have to guard, but maybe Mobley makes that fine and Allen makes that fine. I like that trade.
Karis LeVert and Isaac Okoro and 2 seconds for Gary Trent Jr. and a contract that Toronto's looking to dump, whether it's Chris Boucher or more likely Kem Birch.
I think that if anybody says no, Toronto, well, that's another
Toronto
good one. 2 for 2. I don't hate either of those, because I think Trent gives you some of the shooting and is at least disruptive defensively when he's at his best. A little smaller than I want for that 3 for the Cavs, but like, from Toronto's perspective, you don't know if you're going to have any control over Trent because of that player option. So I think you take back a flyer on Okoro and whatever else you can. I think that makes total sense for them too.
This one is Cody Martin has not come back from his knee injury yet. He's appeared in 1 game this season, but he did just sign a contract basically at the was less, not basically at the mid-level, it was less than the mid-level exception. So he's under team control for the next 4 years, essentially, if you want him, at no more than $8.7 million. But again, he's played in 1 game this season. So Cody Martin for Dylan Windler and Lamar Stevens. And if there's a second round pick that needs to go in there, my gut instinct was Cleveland might say no because they seem to really like Lamar Stevens, but you can sprinkle in other money. It's not going to be Dean Wade, but like you could get, would you do even, Isaac Okoro for Cody Martin straight up? You could do. Who says no
I
to
mean,
that?
I'd rather have Caleb. Can we just make, can we pull some shenanigans and have it be
I
Caleb
think
Martin?
he's their only option at the 4 aside from Jimmy Butler now that Jovic is injured. And I guess they have Haywood Highsmith too, but still.
Yeah, no, I Martin's not playing is a factor. And do they like Lamar Stevens, the Cavs, or is it just like he's the only guy that we can throw out there that's just going to guard really hard?
I think I would prefer if I were them to just get off Isaac Okoro for Cody Martin. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I think we know all we need to know about Okoro at this point.
I think I have a couple more here. Okay, so would you do Evan Fournier, Cam Reddish, and 2 seconds for LeVert and Dylan Windler?
I don't think so. I think the Cavs say no there. Fournier feels like dead money, and like, is it a flyer on Reddish if this is now, let's take a shot on him? Is he a third draft guy now? I don't know how much stock I could put in Reddish anymore.
Would you do Dylan Windler and Isaac Okoro for Gary Harris?
I think I probably would. I still feel like I think maybe I'm just a little too rosy about Gary Harris. I still think he's Denver Gary Harris that just back cuts really well off Jokic. But I think
Orlando says no. I would trade if Orlando would do it. I would do Karis LeVert for Gary Harris, and if they want to include another money in there to match it up, but it works financially.
Yeah, I think that does give, because again, we've talked about it a lot. LeVert's just kind of superfluous with Mitchell and Garland, and you don't really need that much more.
Kind of superfluous with Markelle Fultz and Cole Anthony and Paolo Banchero a little bit too, though.
A little bit, but I think LeVert's probably a better offensive player than Fultz. But I mean, not that that's like
maybe not this season. I think Fultz is definitely the better game manager.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I guess LeVert's just a six man to me that I wish could shoot a little better.
And here is one that I came up with in light of the Devin Booker injury: Landry Shamet and Jay Crowder for Karis LeVert.
I'm definitely doing that if I'm the Cavs. So I guess it's the Suns saying no if I have to pick one. Although, how much better your offer is going to get for Crowder at this point? Like, are there any offers at all?
And I don't know. Landry Shamet's had some higher moments, but I don't know if people want the longer term money that's left on his deal. And like the shooting that Landry Shamet provides would probably actually help Cleveland.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. It's certainly more than LeVert has shot it okay, but nobody's afraid of him, catch and shoot. I don't see that.
Going to cut in here. That'll do it for part 1 of our Eastern Conference mailbag. Be on the lookout for part 2. It'll come out immediately the day after this. It's coming out the part 1's coming out on a Thursday. So the next one will come out on a Friday. As always, please remember to rate, review, subscribe to us wherever you consume us. Subscribe on YouTube. Tell people about us. Join our Discord. Link is in the podcast and YouTube description. Follow us on all the socials at HardwoodKnocks on TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube, of course. And then at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. Until next time, and as always, leave you with the apology to Jared Allen and also shout out to Frank Ntilikina.